Now, maybe Kant is just being a little sloppy when he says this is the second formulation of the categorical imperative. Um, Maybe it's not the same principle at all. Maybe this is really a different but also important principle. So, what Louis Pojman does is he says, let's interpret it that way. Pojman is trying to come up with a charitable interpretation of Kant, one which is plausible and consistent. So, it can't be that Pojman is saying it can't be that Kant really thinks this is the same exact principle as the categorical imperative. Let's say it's a different principle. And it can't be that Kant is really saying that any action which can be consistently willed to be universally followed, where you could will the maxim is universally followed, that any action like that is right. Because if there's somebody who hates blue-eyed children, it would be consistent for them to wish that the maxim kill all blue-eyed babies was universally followed. Okay, Kant can't be saying that this is wrong just because it doesn't pass the categorical imperative. It is wrong, but it does pass the categorical imperative, right? So what Pojman does is he comes up with an interpretation of Kant that goes like this. The categorical imperative is one principle, the principle of ends is another, and an action has to pass both tests to be right, basically. So to be right, that is morally obligatory, a proposed action must pass both the categorical imperative and the principle of ends tests. Um, so passing each one is necessary for being right. And then together, they're supposed to be jointly sufficient for rightness. So what about this maxim, kill all blue-eyed children? Does it pass the test of the categorical imperative? Pojman says, yes, it does pass that test. You can consistently will that that maxim should be universally followed. But does it pass the principle of ends test? The principle of ends says that always treat any rational being as an end in itself and never merely as a means to some end you are seeking. So if you kill a baby just because his eyes are blue, you're not treating it as an end in itself. You're treating it as if it were a worthless thing. So the principle kill all, or the maxim kill all blue-eyed children, passes the categorical imperative test but doesn't pass the principle of ends test. And for that reason, according to Kant's theory, it would not be right. In fact, it would be wrong. Yay! That makes the blue-eyed baby happy. Still, Pojman says this isn't going to help Kant's theory very much. And Pojman gives a number of other objections to Kant's theory. I'll just give you one. Um, think about a person who doesn't like dogs at all. Now, I like dogs. I have a small dog. It's not a Chihuahua on meth like is pictured here, but um, consider someone that doesn't like dogs at all. They really just hate dogs. And then there's this yappy little dog, and it's just stepping on their last nerve, you know? Yip, 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 yip. One of those. And this person feels like just putting on their Doc Marten boots and stomping that little dog into the ground. Okay, so would it be right or wrong? Well, I know what I would say, but the question is, what does Kant's theory say? Okay, could one rationally will that this maxim become a law of nature? That is, can this person reasonably will that the maxim, when there's a yippy little dog in front of you, driving you crazy and it won't shut up, and no one else is around who will see this and get you in trouble, then stomp that dog to death till it's quiet. Could our person rationally will that to be followed in all cases by everyone everywhere? Yeah, it seems like it. If he just doesn't like dogs at all, there's nothing inconsistent with him wishing that everybody should follow that rule. Okay, so it passes the categorical imperative test. Now, on the interpretation we're considering, to be right, it has to also pass the principle of ends test. Does it do that? Well, that says always treat any rational being as an end in itself, never merely as a means to some end you are seeking. Does it pass that test? Well, yes, it does. Because a rational being, well, this dog is not a rational being, is he? He's not the kind of being which can do mathematics, can engage in scientific reasoning, can evaluate evidence. It's a dog. Okay, so this action of stomping the dog, acting on the maxim that whenever a little dog is yapping at you and won't shut up and there's no one else around, then you should stomp it. That maxim passes the test of the categorical imperative, and it passes the test of the principle of ends. And so it looks like it won't be wrong. It looks like it'll be right, or at least permissible. Well, that seems like a big problem. Most of us would agree that that action is wrong. And Kant's theory, the way Pojman is interpreting it, says that it is not wrong. And so this looks like a problem for the theory, and I don't know how Kant can get around this problem either. We'll consider another objection to Kant's theory a bit later on, but one of the things that's important about Kant is not that everybody accepts his ethical theory, but rather that Kant says a lot of true and profound things about ethics. And you might just accept Pojman's idea that the categorical imperative is merely a necessary condition on rightness. In other words, for an action to be right, the principle that you're following has to be this way. It has to pass this test. But you might think, well, it's only a necessary condition, though. It's not sufficient for its being right. Sometimes later philosophers have called this the test of universalizability. And I actually think this is a useful and true claim. The claim is that, the basic idea is that if something is right for you to do, then it would also be right for anybody in relevantly similar circumstances. So maybe I really feel like telling a lie to make myself look like a big man. And I might have a lot of reasons that or a lot of motives for doing that. But if I consider somebody else's case where they're considering lying just to make themselves look good, it would only be right for me to lie if it would also be right for them to lie, and if it would be right for anyone to lie in similar circumstances. So whether an action is right or wrong doesn't depend so much on who's doing it as it depends on the sum total of circumstances. And if it's right for you in a particular situation, it's going to be right for anybody in a similar situation, and the same if it's wrong. So you might think the basic idea is a test of universalizability, which can help you figure out whether an action is right or wrong. But I want to pass on now to some of the claims that Kant makes along the way, which are consistent with his theory, but which don't require his theory. And these distinctions on this chart are pretty much universally accepted by philosophers. Only the very last one at the bottom is controversial. So this part is controversial. But this is pretty much common coin. I mean, this is terminology that all ethicists use, that all philosophers use when discussing right and wrong. So let's just go through and give examples of these. Take anything that we do, the sum total of all things we do, you can divide those into two classes. Some are mere behavior, and some are voluntary actions. So some are things we do, but they're involuntary. So if I fall down, that's mere behavior. If the doctor hits my knee with a little instrument and my leg sticks out, that's just a reflex. That's involuntary. If I sneeze, that's behavior, but that's involuntary. And those kind of actions aren't really what ethics is concerned with. So ethics is really concerned with the voluntary actions. Out of voluntary actions, then, some of them are contrary to duty. In other words, they're wrong. That is impermissible. They are something that we ought not do, and they're contrary to what we ought to do. And then other actions are permissible. So they're not contrary to duty. But you can divide those permissible actions into two different groups. Some of them are not required by duty, things that we are allowed to do, and some of them are required by duty. So what's an action that's not contrary to duty and not required by duty? Well, a lot of trivial actions, tossing a ball up and down in the air because you're bored. That's not contrary to your moral duties, and it's not required by your moral duties. Choosing to drink Pepsi rather than Coke at lunch, that's not contrary to duty, and it's not required by duty. And then some actions are required by duty. So if you promise to pay this money back on Wednesday, then you have to pay me the money back on Wednesday. So paying me back, it's not contrary to duty, right? And also, paying me back is required by duty. It's something that you ought to do. In other words, it is a right action. It's morally right. So those are distinctions which you should keep in mind that will help you think about ethical questions. The last distinction is controversial. What it basically says is that motive matters, and that only actions done from a sense of duty, only doing something because you realize it's what's required of you, only that, Kant says, has moral worth. Whereas an action done merely in accordance with duty doesn't have any moral worth.